Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for June 5th, 2024. 2 days ago, on June 3rd, former weapons inspector and anti-war activist and retired Marine Scott Ritter was removed from a plane on the way to Istanbul, where he was going to catch a plane to go to St. Petersburg, Russia, for a conference of the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. He was removed from the plane by Customs and Border Patrol on orders of the U.S. State Department, and his passport was seized. The attempt to remove him, or the successful removing of Ritter, prevented him from attending a conference of the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, which he was going to address. And then he was going to go from there on a peace tour of Russia to stop a war between the United States and Russia. Ritter's topic at the St. Petersburg Forum was going to be on the transition from the existing collapsing imperial order, the so-called rules-based order, to a multipolar world. In discussing what happened, Ritter made the following statement. He made it in reference to the fact that war is coming unless there's a dramatic shift in policy from the United States. And here's what he said. The command centers that Russia uses were conceptualized and constructed during the Soviet Union, when Ukraine was part of the Union, and from a Russian perspective, they were deep in the Russian rear, protected. He's talking here about the early warning radar stations that were attacked by drones 2 weeks ago. He goes on to say, if Ukraine now is carved out and made part of NATO, and you insert American missiles there, all of these places that were thought to be safe in the rear are now reachable. And if America allows Ukraine to use ATACMS missiles to strike these facilities, Russia will nuke NATO. Not Ukraine, NATO. The Ukrainians are complaining that the United States will only allow them to use the HIMARS, that they won't be allowed to use the ATACMS to strike Russia yet. But just so everybody in your audience understands, we are one ATACMS launch away from everybody dying. We are one ATACMS launch away from everybody dying, he repeated. The Russians aren't playing games here. Now, that's the kind of assessment that needs to be heard as the Americans are marching into a nuclear war under the expectation that they can back Putin down, that Putin's bluffing, that there's no serious threat to America from the escalation that's going on with Ukraine. The use of ATACMS would be the next red line that Biden would step over. And the idea is go ahead and hit military targets inside Russia. But Ukraine is already using missiles to shell civilian centers in the town of Belgorod. So the idea that this is something that's going to happen in the future is fraudulent. It's already occurring. And the Russians know that very, very well. Now, in terms of what Ritter was going to discuss and what he has discussed, he talked about it on Judge Napolitano's show yesterday, the idea of the BRICS, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa alliance, which is expanding and which soon could have 20 to 30 new members, that this represents a threat to the existing empire. As I've been telling you for a long time, this is LaRouche's idea initially, was that Russia, India, and China could form an alliance that would be strong enough to overwhelm the power of the City of London, Wall Street, and the Western military capability. But what LaRouche said is bring the United States in, have Russia, India, and China allied with the United States for a new global economic development system, trashing the existing dollar system. Now, Ritter went on to say in his statement that the US and NATO are losing the whole world. Everyone wants to join the BRICS. And he explained that the targeting of him is an example of the State Department and NATO operating through Ukraine. He said that the State Department is financing the Center for Countering Disinformation, a Ukrainian agency, but one which is essentially run by the State Department and NATO and funded by them, to produce a hit list of what they call information terrorists. They also call them Putin mouthpieces. Ritter is on that list. So is Ray McGovern. So is Tucker Carlson. And so is Helga Zepp-LaRouche, who's been on the top of that list since it first came out, along with our Senate candidate, Diane Sayre, and I'm on that list. We're called information terrorists to clear the way for us to be hit by assassins, as has happened to some people already on that list. Now, Ritter has challenged the State Department to debate him on this, but he said they don't want to debate. They want to kill you, to take away your right to free speech. Now, think about what it means to be put on such a list. The idea that an American is operating against the U.S. interests. Well, what are the U.S. interests? Do we have a national interest to go to war with Russia? What is Russia doing to the United States? The United States is the one that imposed sanctions on Russia. The United States is providing weapons to Ukraine to target Russia. The United States has committed itself to isolating Russia. And what happened? It failed. The geniuses in the State Department and in NATO believed that they could defeat a weakened Russian army and bring Russia to its knees, carry out a color revolution to get rid of Putin, a regime change, as they did in Ukraine. And what they're finding is that Putin not only is popular, but Russia is growing as a physical economy. Russia is now fourth largest nation in the world in terms of industrial economic output per capita. And so the idea that somehow you could weaken Russia and go in and grab its resources has proven to be a colossal flop. Instead of acknowledging that, instead of saying, okay, maybe we were wrong about Ukraine, maybe we should have accepted Putin's offer in December 21, when he offered to have mutual security guarantees for Russia and Ukraine, that was rejected by Biden. Instead of negotiating a settlement after the special military operation started, a settlement that had been agreed to by the Zelensky government with the Russians in March, April 2022, instead of accepting that, they sent Boris Johnson, the hapless jerk, former prime minister of Britain, to tell Zelensky, don't sign and we'll give you all the weapons you need. And as a result, maybe 500,000 Ukrainians have died. And not civilians, but soldiers who have been killed in this war that should never have happened, which NATO would like to make a permanent war, and Biden would like it to be permanent so he could run for president as a wartime president. So the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum topic that Ritter was going to address is called the formation of new centers of growth as the cornerstone of a multipolar world. Instead of a unipolar order, a world in which all nations are able to negotiate for mutual benefit. Now, that's what the BRICS represents. We've put out a report on this State Department Ukrainian hit list operation. It's titled Countering Disinformation by Assassination, the lesson of the Fico hit, referring to the attempt to assassinate the Slovakian prime minister. I will have a link to that in the description section so you can read for yourself what your tax dollars are going to suppress the freedom of speech, the freedom of association, the freedom to politically organize an alternative. That's what they're trying to suppress, not through debate, but through war and assassination. Now, the BRICS are succeeding because the weaponized dollar, with sanctions, with green anti-development policy, with IMF conditionalities, that's being rejected by virtually the whole world. And they're moving to use national currencies in trade, to protect their people as sovereign nations are supposed to do. And so the US and NATO is going to war against Russia using Ukraine. Gaza is targeting the BRICS as well. There are threats against China, economic warfare, provocation over Taiwan. So this is what they're trying to keep away from you, that there is an alternative system coming into being. That's what Scott Ritter was going to St. Petersburg to discuss. And that's what I'll be discussing today in my weekly dialogue with Helga Zepp-LaRouche. I would encourage you to log on for that. There'll be a link to it in the description section. It's time that the American people speak up and say no to this tyranny, no to this suppression of your rights, and the use of your tax dollars to engage in permanent war that could put us into a direct war with Russia that could become a nuclear holocaust. So thanks for joining me today. And don't forget, at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, I'll have my weekly discussion with Helga Zepp-LaRouche.
Which can contribute to bringing about a solution, an escape from the collapse of civilization. This is no pipe dream, this is no fantasy, this is real.